Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward.
Welcome, my friends, to Paranormal Heart Podcast, a safe place to talk about your paranormal encounters. I'm your host, Kat Ward. Folks, in episode 123, my special guest is ex-naval cryptologist Wib. Wib talks a bit about what his job was like back in the 80s, an unbelievable chatter he picked up in the late 80s of an alleged UFO landing, and three-eyed extraterrestrials in the Russian village of Voronezh. Wib had been monitoring Russian intelligence when he picked up the chatter. If you're interested in reading about this event, I have added the link from time.com in the show notes. If you have any stories related to paranormal experiences like ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, extraterrestrials, local legends, or your psychic gifts, I would love to hear from you. You can be a guest on the show and share your story, or you can send me your real story for me to narrate on the show. You can reach out to me at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. If you want to remain anonymous, I will make sure not to mention your real name. The new episodes of the show are released on the second and last Sunday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, Podbean, and all major podcast platforms. If you wish to support the show, please share it with others, like each episode, and don't forget to leave a review. It would help us reach more people and make them realize that they are not alone in their paranormal experiences. Additionally, you can now find Paranormal Heart Podcast merchandise on Teepublic. You can find mugs, t-shirts, hats, and more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, Wib. Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, now that we have things up and running. So thank you to you. So as the conversation, when I first messaged you, I heard you on my Paranormal Brothers show, Tommy Cullum's Let's Get Freaky podcast. It was an amazing episode. I really enjoyed it. And I had to reach out to you and invite you. So thank you so much for accepting.
Absolutely. I know, I only know him as Mr. Freaky.
He reached out to me a couple of years ago to be on his show, and then when I found out at the time he had only been doing it for like 6 months, and I thought, you are doing an exceptional job. You need to be on my show now. And we just hit it, and now we just call each other, like we consider each other family now. So that's nice.
He's a very good guy.
Yeah,
very good guy.
Down to earth and everything, yeah. So thank you, Tommy. Yeah. As I look at my microphone to say that. Okay, so you had very interesting experience. So would you like to start with telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into that experience?
Sure. So we're going back to 1986. I was doing really poorly at school, and this was 85, doing really poorly at school, turned 16, dropped out, and joined the Navy. Scored really high on my ASVABs and qualified to become a cryptologic technician in the Navy. And so I went through boot camp, went through sea school, and was stationed over in San Vito dei Normanni, which is maybe 10 miles away from where the president was with the G7 last week.
Oh, wow.
A week and a half ago. He was in Brindisi. We used to hang out in Brindisi all the time. It's a lot of news reports were saying Puglia. Puglia is the state, kind of like, I live in Texas now. It's a state in America. Puglia is a state of Italy.
Okay.
And Brindisi is one of the big cities in Puglia. And about 10, 15 miles west of Brindisi was the base that I was stationed at. Big listening post. It had a huge Woolen Weber antenna. It could listen to all sorts of radio frequencies, uh, surprisingly over the nap of the earth, over the horizon. At some points during the summertime, we could catch rogue FM radio frequencies from the east coast of America in Italy on that Woolen Weber.
Wow.
So it was what the U.S. Navy would use to intercept radio transmissions from countries of interest.
Gotcha.
And our primary targets were Syria, the Middle East, North Africa, and especially the Black Sea Fleet. And that's basically where it starts. That's what put me in that position. Is I was a very good code copier. I copied Morse code. I was a CTR. They called us ditty chasers. And what we did was we would sit there for 8 hours a day and just copy Morse code. We would sit there and go through the frequencies. We had known frequencies to look for, and we would roll up and down on the dial. And when we heard something going, we'd start copying it. That basically sets the scene of what I was doing up to the point of, what was it, late 88, late 89. I think it was 89 when this happened, October 89.
That must have been, you must have been, because listening to code for 8 hours, as I mentioned to you in our conversation earlier, I had my amateur radio license from when I was much younger, and I think it was 25 words a minute qualified for Morse code, sending and receiving. That little bit that I did for practicing was enough to, whenever you go to bed, you can hear the dits and the daws in your head. That must have been did you ever dream of all that?
I used to, and a lot of people that were CTRs, we would talk code in our sleep. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. And my roommate in the barracks, he was a R brancher. Was he an R? No, he was a T brancher. He was a CTT. I was a CTR. He was a CTT, which is a more technical. They go after like machine language, machine communications, point to point. And he used to go nuts because I was sitting there in my sleep talking code. And he'd wake me up. Stop!
I can't remember what it is now, but whenever I was on the ham radio, if I wanted to cuss, I would say, what's S? Is it 2 dits or 3 dits?
3 dits.
So I'd say 3 dits, 4 dits, 2 dits, and a da. For those who don't know, it's SHIT. So that was my workaround. But yeah, do you still hear all the code now?
No,
thankfully.
It's been 35 years.
Yeah.
However, if you put me at a keyboard and play Morse code, my fingers just start going to where they need to go.
Right.
I used to be able to spell it out in my brain of, that says whatever. Now I can't do it in my brain anymore, but my fingers still know what keys to hit when I hear that, the 3 dits, whatever combination of dits and daws.
Yeah.
My fingers know what keys to hit.
So when you heard the code, is it like a typewriter that you're typing it on?
It's
Kind
it
of
is
teletype.
it's a teletypewriter. It was a World War II era teletype called a KSR. And everything that we typed in that KSR, and of course it was all carbon paper. It was two layers of paper with a piece of carbon paper in between. But everything we typed would also get electronically typed out on a matching KSR in Fort Meade for the NSA.
Mm-hmm.
And for their analysts.
Yep.
So our analysts would look at it. God only knows how long it took the Fort Meade analysts to look at, simple, most of the time you didn't know what you were copying. You could be copying a grocery list from one ship to another. But because Russian ships were sending it, you copied it. In Fort Meade, that could probably land really low on the totem pole of priorities. Mm-hmm. So maybe 2 months from now, we'll look at it.
Wow.
God only knows. But everything that we copied, we would immediately go and analyze as soon as it was copied.
Okay, so you weren't privy to what the code was actually saying. You were just copying it and sending it to someone who could read the code?
Well, somebody that had the breakouts. We had charts. Mm-hmm. Because the messages we could tell what the chatter was saying. Because the chatter is all Q signals, Q signs, mm-hmm. and those are international. But when they went into the actual messages, those were all encrypted.
Okay.
And they were encrypted they were manually encrypted, not like today there's encryption where it's put through a 256-bit cipher. No, it was, you have a chart and you have an A and you have a C and you come over here. Okay, I need to put an F. And
gotcha.
And so they would use that chart to write out an encrypted. It wasn't actually encrypted, but it was a message, and we would build those charts, but there were some blanks. So some fields we didn't have the entire row of what everything broke out to. So even though I had copied the entire message, okay, we don't have this letter because we don't know what that's blank in our chart, stuff like that. So there would be holes in both. But if we can do from context, okay, this word has got to be this, then we can then fill in that chart, stuff like that. So I would copy the code. I would bring it over. They called it pander, which is a very derogatory word.
Oh.
But yeah, pandering. It's basically the people that all they did was live off of what we provided to them.
Okay.
Our analysts. They were called P&R, but it was pander.
Okay.
we would give them the messages that we copied, and they would break them out, and then they would bring it to the brass and say, this is what we broke, this is what we intercepted and copied. And then they would get all the glory because they broke it, not because they found the conversation, not because they copied the code, but because they had a chart that they could sit there and figure out.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's kind of not fair. You did the work.
That's why we used to call them panders.
Yeah. Kind of like up here in Canada, military police, we lovingly call them meatheads. Lovingly, in case anyone's listening. Yeah, so I get it. So what was the code that you were collecting that made me want you to be on the show?
Okay, so October of '89. Again, we were copying code not only in the Black Sea Fleet, but also in the landmass surrounding the Black Sea. So all the airfields and they all were participants in Morse code communication to the birds in the air, the airplanes that they had launched. There's multiple military airfields around it and everything. So we started picking up military chatter about military troop movements into the area of right around the area, which is right at the border of today, modern day Ukraine, Russia, towards the south. And they were pulling troops from everywhere. And they were calling up to Russia and calling up to Moscow, coordinating with Moscow to pull troops from the Far East and the Baltic area. They were pulling all these troops down. And then the folks that were, primarily on the med, because we also had folks that were looking at the med. Usually our frequencies were broken up. If you were focused on the Black Sea, you had this set of frequencies to look at because that's what the Russians used. If you were looking at Middle East, North Africa, you had this set of frequencies to look at because that's what Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, all those other countries, that's what they use. And then there were other frequencies that were also for the ships, the Russian ships in the Mediterranean, because, Mediterranean is international waters. Mm-hmm. There's Russians in there too. We kind of had specific, depending on what positions you were sitting, was the frequencies that you would monitor. And sometimes you would pick up a handshake on one frequency that we were known to monitor, and they would say, hey, switch to this frequency so that we can have a conversation.
Okay, yep.
And then you roll over to that frequency. Sometimes there's back then there were two ways to talk. There was simplex, which both transmission and reception were done on the same frequency. And then there were it's called complex, where one transmission would be on one frequency, and then another transmission would be on a second frequency, with the hopes that anybody trying to intercept would only have one or the other frequency. So
Gotcha.
would only get half the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russians did that a lot. But typically, depending on, sometimes they would say, go to this frequency, and it didn't mean go to that frequency. It meant 15 kilohertz down, send on this frequency, 15 kilohertz up from that frequency, receive on that frequency.
Gotcha.
So, you'd sit there until you grab both the sender and receiver, or if they were all, if they were both on the same, then you, okay, I don't have to mess with the dials anymore. I can just sit here and copy code.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were getting massive amounts of traffic from the Mediterranean, the warships that were in the Mediterranean, because at the time, it was, late 80s, Cold War was still brewing. There were a number of warships in the Med. They were coming up. They decided they were going to start coming up through the Turkish Straits to get into the Black Sea, which isn't typical because that's their home turf. They almost the entire, if you count Bulgaria and Romania as being part of Russia back in '89, if you count Bulgaria and Romania and all of Russia, it was just a little bit of Turkey that bordered on the Black Sea. So the Black Sea was their backyard. It was their playground, and they were sending everybody up there, and they were bringing all these troops down from all over Russia down to a place just a little east and north by northeast of the Black Sea. And for a couple days, we couldn't figure out why. It was just they were sending all these troops.
And this is unusual, correct?
Absolutely unusual. And remember, it's the Cold War. Yep. So everything that they're doing, NATO and America, we're trying to figure out what the hell they're doing and mirroring and trying to make, is this signs of a new offensive or what's going on? So we're maneuvering and positioning our troops and our units. It started through radio operators, just doing scuttlebutt, gossiping between each other. They didn't have any official news, but they radio over to one another. Hey, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And they started spilling the beans, and there was a UFO that landed in this small town and wherever, PFE, and there were aliens sighted and all this other stuff, and they were reacting, they were responding because they didn't know if the aliens were friendly and there was verification. The law enforcement of the village had seen it and everything, and so boom, they were sending military down, and
that's wild.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And it went on. It when you read about it today, it seems like they make it seem as if the spacecraft landed, the aliens got out of their spacecraft, did a quick stroll, and then took off. But from my point of view, it was days. It was a span of days before there was any kind of, okay, we can stand down. We don't have the pucker factor can go back to 8 maybe. It was crazy for a number of days, like 5 days before they stopped the troop movement going down to converging on that small town.
That's they probably said that it landed, they came out, and then they took off right away, probably so they wouldn't cause mass hysteria, I would assume.
In the news, it was so only children actually saw the aliens. And when we say children, I think it was like 16-year-olds down to like a 10-year-old or something like that. It was, they were fairly young, but there were a couple kids that were old enough to be like 16, 17 years old, but they were still considered children. Yep. And written off by the popular media. Yep. The spaceship itself, that was confirmed by the town's law enforcement. The police officers in town confirmed that, yeah, we absolutely saw it.
do you remember, or are you able to tell us what the name of the town is?
It was Voronezh. It's a Russian town.
Okay.
Where even when looking at it, I would not be able to tell you how to properly pronounce the
Gotcha.
name.
Yep.
But it begins with a V. There's a G somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So do you know, because I know you didn't see this personally, but did they give any description of the craft and the entities?
So there was no description from my memory, and I have to preface this and say that when I was on Freaky's show, this was 35 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of brushed my memory up by looking at the different news reports, what they had in the newspapers from back then. And I was like, okay, that jives with what I remember. I don't remember that, but okay. And I'm going to try to give you answers, but delineate what is from my memory and what I picked up from refreshing my memory.
Gotcha. Yep.
So in the news, there were the craft was 3 meters. I don't know how big 3 meters is. I'm American.
Yeah, I can tell you in a second. I have to Google it. 3 meters, 2 feet, 9 feet, 10 inches.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So they were saying that it was about 3 meters of a craft, which that doesn't sound big at all. But,
No, it doesn't.
and there were 3, and now this is from direct memory from what I remember from the gossip that went back and forth between the operators. There were 3 aliens that stepped out. They were very large creatures, large humanoid creatures that were approximately 6 feet tall, or whatever the equivalent in metrics was. Very muscular, with little itty bitty infant heads. Yes, your reaction is exactly the same as my reaction when as I'm typing it. Well, actually, it was after I typed it, because it was all in Russian. And I brought it over to the CTI, the eye brancher, who's the linguist. And when he translated it, he read it back to me. And your reaction was the same as mine. It was like, wait a second, you got this big, huge, hulking with an itty bitty tiny infant head? Really?
That must have been comical to see. I mean, I'm sure the people who actually saw it, maybe their initial reaction was not terror, but just like, am I really seeing this?
But that was a direct memory. In the news reports, there were reports that there was a robot that was with the 3 aliens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall hearing anything about a robot, but in the news reports that I looked up, there was a report that there was a robot with the 3 aliens, but no description of what the robot looked like.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It almost sounds like they're just kind of doing like, what's the word I'm looking for? Before you send everybody else, you send a small...
reconnaissance?
Yes. So maybe they're just there, small recon. I don't know.
Tourism.
Oh, yeah.
But, and something that I remember, and so I remember differently from what was in the popular media, so back in '89, there was a big hullabaloo that when the craft did take off, there was an element left behind that had never been found on Earth before. That was what they were saying. However, in the news reports, there was a rock or something that was left behind that was very unfamiliar to anybody in the village. And upon further investigation, it's a common rock around Earth, just not in that location, like not in that region.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's interesting. I wonder, I can't even begin to assume why that would have happened, because there's lots of possibilities.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a big burn mark. This is from both my direct memories as well as from the popular media. There was a rather large burn mark where the craft took off from.
Mm-hmm.
And it took forever for any grass to grow. And I mean, it was another year before I left that duty station, and people, the operators would still, from time to time, ask, "How's the grass? How's the grass doing?"
Oh, wow.
And the operators would, from the area would respond, "Yeah, still no grass."
That's wild. Do you know if anybody picked up any chatter about why the grass wasn't growing? Like, I wonder if they looked for any kind of residue from the craft?
There was nothing in the radio chatter that we picked up, because that was all military.
Yeah.
In the popular news of the day, the contemporary news reporting, they basically wrote it off as a children's wild tale, and they really didn't investigate it very thoroughly, because apparently a couple years prior, there was another report of a woman that had seen aliens in another part of Russia. And she described the aliens as being very similar to what the children described, as large, muscular, humanoids, but with little heads. And they said, "Oh, the kids are just making it up."
Yeah.
So they dropped it.
Kind of the Russian equivalency of swamp gas.
But that, the millions of dollars spent in both NATO and Russia repositioning all these military units for a children's story is kind of like,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's kind of like somebody calling the authorities and saying, "Send everyone." Because, wow, that's amazing. So anybody else? So were you on a base or were you in a ship when you heard this?
I was on a base.
Okay.
At that point, I was stationed at a base doing direct support, and so whenever a ship came in that needed a CTR with Middle East, North African expertise, I would get sent out to row to Spain and then flown over to the ship. But at that point, it just so happened at that point in time, there was no ship that needed me, so I was on base.
Do you know if anybody else on base, was there a lot of talk on base about what chatter you had just picked up, or was it pretty much hush hush?
It was kind of a joke.
Okay, yeah.
We would sit there and laugh about it, that that the Russians are chasing aliens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
because back in the 80s, you had to be a real weirdo to think that aliens were landing on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 2024, it's a completely different story. Now that the mathematics have been explained of there is an actual chance. Back then, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
If you said you thought there was a chance for aliens even to exist in the universe, let alone to visit Earth,
Yep.
you were a nutbag.
Yep.
So when this stuff was coming in, we were like, what the hell? These are who we are up to. We're up against these people?
Yeah.
These crazy people?
Wow. So if I wanted to look into some of the news articles, any idea where I would start?
You know what? Hang on. I apologize. I'm looking on my phone.
That's okay.
I know that's not good.
I did the same to you. I was Googling something, so.
1989 Russian alien visit. Let me start with that.
Okay.
Oh, I lied. There's no G in it.
Oh, okay.
It is the Voronezh. VORONEZH.
Okay.
It's on Wikipedia and there's a whole bunch of other news reports about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely Google that. So have you ever intercepted any other communications about anything similar like that after or even before?
Anything supernatural like that or extra-terrestrial?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was all military related.
Okay, yeah.
Although, and you as a ham radio operator, you will enjoy this. There are some North African countries that cannot afford the equipment to send and receive Morse code.
Wow.
So what they do is they get on the microphone and go, da 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 da.
No way. Wow. Holy cow.
It is, you have to intercept it and copy it, but the entire time you are trying not to laugh your ass off.
Yeah, you got to concentrate on what you're picking up and not laugh. Wow.
It's like, dude, just tell them what you want to say.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's comical. Wow.
There was another time, and this is Russians doing this. The actual Russians. It was earlier than 89. It was like 87, 88. It was May Day. May Day is a big Russian holiday.
Oh.
People get drunk. Well, one of the radio operators got so drunk he couldn't copy code.
Oh no.
And there was a very, very secret message that needed to be sent. And the transmitter was, he must have sent it like 10, 15 times.
Oh no.
And the receiver was like, no, I no, bad copy.
Yeah.
So finally they did away with the Morse code and they get on with voice.
Oh no.
And at that point I pulled my CTI over. I'm like, they're talking. I hear voices. They're talking. They're not sending Morse. So he put the cans on and they whispered because they knew it was an open channel. They whispered this very secret message. But it was okay because they whispered.
Oh, geez. They should make a movie out of this. I mean, aliens with tiny heads, whispering top secret information. Oh, good grief. You can't make this up.
Yeah.
I wonder if that individual got in trouble for it.
I don't know if he did because, I mean, we're not going to tell on them.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. You want them to do it again.
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy. Too funny. Yeah, like you were saying, back in the 80s, I've always been into the paranormal and UFOs and extraterrestrials and everything like that. And people used to think I was crazy. I had 3 heads. And as you said, now in 2024, it's not as bad. Maybe I have 1.5 heads. People still kind of give you a look, but not as bad as it was in the 80s.
You just got to think of the mathematics about it, you know. Mm-hmm. Even the mathematics of 20 years ago, 2000, mm-hmm. It was, if you didn't believe that there is even a possibility that there's other intelligent life somewhere in this universe, mm-hmm. you are a moron.
Yep.
Because the mathematics, but then advance that to 2024, and what we knew in 2000 was just a fraction of what we know about the universe today, mm-hmm. where those numbers are even exponentially bigger. There's no way that there's not Now, are they so intelligent that they could possibly make a trip to Earth only to crash into the planet in Roswell? I don't know, but
yeah. My husband and I have had discussions about that. You know, if they're so highly advanced, why do they crash here? And it's like, well, maybe it has something to do with our gravity, or just something that they're not familiar with, or maybe they're just not as intelligent as we think.
Or maybe they're unionized.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, think about, the United States military. We have some of the state-of-the-art equipment. How many training exercises have helicopters have gone down in the last year because of faulty equipment?
Yeah, exactly. So they probably
and we weren't on a different planet. We were right here in the United States.
Yeah. So they probably have the same problems we do.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
I mean, I had heard years and years ago, I don't know, I don't remember what year, there was a Canadian ship. I can't remember what kind it was, but there was something that was malfunctioning, and there happened to have been a guy that had a hockey stick on board, and he was able to fix whatever it was with his hockey stick. Now, I still don't know if that's true or not, but it makes for a great story. Canadian using a hockey stick to fix military equipment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's a better story that a Canadian fixed something with a hockey stick, or his first thought was to fix it with a hockey stick. Oh, we had all sorts of equipment that could have fixed it, but he insisted.
Now that's comical too. It's like, good grief. Now, do you have any thoughts on where these extraterrestrials might have come from, or what they were doing here? Do you have any speculations?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing in either what we copied or in the contemporary news reports that gives any clue of what those aliens were doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just said that they were, I doubt they were actually, I doubt this is reality, but the impression that I got was they were wandering around aimlessly. Because there was no detail about, they were studying this tree or anything. No, there was no details like that. And I think that is because the investigators or the people that were assigned to investigate kind of wrote it off, so it didn't really delve deep.
Yeah.
But if I was assigned to forensically investigate this, I'd want to know, okay, kid, what the hell was he doing?
Yeah.
Step by step. What was he? What did he? What do they? What did they look at? What did they touch? Everything. I would want to know it, but I think because it sounds like apparently they wrote it off as kids.
Yep.
They didn't really ask any kind of questions like that.
Which is too bad, because you could ask, were they making a sound? Did they have a smell? Like, could you feel anything from them? Like when you approach an electric fence, you can start feeling it as you get closer. Like, do they have anything like that?
That was another thing that you just jogged my memory. In the traffic that I remember, there was a mention about special weaponry. In the contemporary news reports, apparently, according to the children, they shot one of the kids with a gun, and the kid disappeared.
Oh.
But reappeared when they took off.
Huh. That's interesting.
And he was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a Monty Python. Yeah, I died, but I got back.
Yeah, exactly.
or what it was. But
that's interesting. Wow. If that is true, I wonder where you went.
Yeah.
Lots of speculations. I'd love to be able to time travel. I'm curious.
The problem with time traveling, I try to keep people that want to time travel, I'm like, you don't know how ridiculously dangerous it is to time travel. No, I won't touch, I won't interact. I'm like, no, you don't understand. The earth revolves. You time travel. You go back in time. And you appear 30 years. You're in space. You're dead.
I never thought of that. Yeah, that's right.
So you can't just time travel. You have to figure out some way to reposition your body to, if you're going backwards in time, reposition your body wherever the hell the Earth was 30 years in the past. Or
you need coordinates.
Yeah. Astral coordinates.
Yeah. That's way beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, because just time traveling, that ain't going to work, because you are dead as soon as you do it.
Yeah, I never even thought of that.
I mean, even if it's just a couple hours time travel, you're going to be somewhere up in the air somewhere, or in the bedrock.
That would not be good.
No.
Hopefully, it would be quick though. Wow. Well, before we sign off, do you have any other final thoughts that you would like to share with us?
No, I don't know of any.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And thank you so much for your service as well.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It got me out of a bad place. I would have been not, it really turned my life around. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. For the good.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Well, you take care. Much love to you and your family.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.
Paranormal Heart Podcast.